Hi, how are you? You can sit with your, if you can sit with your group, yeah, that's great. You should do that if you can. Okay. Let's see how this works. Hey, how are you? Welcome.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half. Closing on our excited. It's costing us more money than I thought, so I'm scared. No, it's not that because it's your investment property. They made us pay way more. We had to pay a lot. It's an investment. Well, I made the mistake of going with a traditional lender, and there's short-term rental lenders out there that look at your income and they want
It's more like the idea.
But it'll be such a great. Oh, I know that. Yeah. I mean, I can't wait. Because everybody's up on the lake where it's very not for 5 miles. There's not a whole lot of doing. But we have Fire Institute, which is a high school athletic. And they're over there. That you can't get into hotels because of them. I was going to target them, but now I'm thinking about doing that. No, that's the other. And they cost, on the average, they're saying you need to estimate $8 to $10 per square foot. Yeah. And it's $60. Well, for what it's worth, that's amazing.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm going to make a few announcements, talk a little bit about today, introduce our speakers, but the bulk of our session today is going to be a discussion with our very distinguished set of Oberlin leaders today. This is one of my favorite classes. We've been doing this for probably a decade, and some of these folks, I'm going to think probably Sharon has been on this paddle the longest, but Greg's been on for a long time too, and it really is exciting for me to have people who are so important in our community taking time out of their day to come here and talk with our class. So just a few details about the weekend and next week. A reminder that hopefully you've already scheduled the time with your partner, group member A and B, and group member C and D for the quiz this weekend. I mentioned I would post the practice quiz, so that should be up sometime tomorrow. I encourage you to take a careful look, not encourage you, ask you, take a careful look at the instructions for the quiz. Talked a little bit about that last time. Next class is actually going to be a workshop working on community voices. The interviews you'll be doing later this semester. This is a really good setup for that discussion, because that experience will culminate in interviewing members of our community on a variety of different issues. So this is a good place to sort of begin to think really deeply about the kinds of questions you might want to be asking related to the particular topics, the topic that you have. So that's something you might want to think about today as we go through this. So today's panel discussion is very much focused on community sustainability and resilience. What does sustainability and resilience mean at the scale of community? Now, in this course and in your life, each of you will intermediately experience being part of at least one community, but in this day and age, probably multiple different communities. Many of you already have some pretty deep experience working in communities. I know that about you. For 4 years, you will be a member of two important communities at Oberlin. You'll be a member of the Oberlin College community, but you will also, during your 4 years here, be a member of the larger Oberlin community that includes the city of Oberlin. And what I want to impress on you is that what you learned during your 4 years here working in the college community, but also in the larger Oberlin community, has the potential to be important to you for the rest of your lives. The community-based interviews for Community Voices project that, again, we'll be starting on next week, focus on providing you with an opportunity to really cultivate what it means to be an engaged member of a community. Today, we're going to be asking the question, what does it mean to work towards building economic, social, and economic sustainability and resilience in the context of a particular community? And as you know, I've invited a group here today that really does address sustainability from all of these different dimensions, from the social dimension, the economic dimension, as well as the ecological dimension within community. While Oberlin students as a whole show a remarkable degree of engagement with the larger Oberlin community, I know that there are still many students in Oberlin who perceive themselves as transients and sort of shy away from involvement in community, feel that this is not their community, not their place to engage, and do not necessarily recognize the potential value of community engagement. I can tell you from 22 years working at Oberlin College, seeking opportunities to assist students in engaging with this community, that engagement in this larger Oberlin community is a deep and powerful experience that can be transformative if you're in your lives, if you take advantage of it. I'm hoping that your experience in this course will help you to come to understand Oberlin as a bit of a microcosm for other communities. We are a small community, but we have the diversity, the challenges, and many of the opportunities of much larger communities. We also have the enormous advantage of working in a community that's small enough where individuals really can make a powerful difference, and those individuals can be students during their time here. All of us have worked very closely with students during our time at Oberlin, and we, as community members, have been enriched by working with Oberlin students, so it goes both ways. All right, so the structure of today's class, I'm going to say a couple words about each of our panelists, and then each of the panelists is going to say a little bit about themselves. I've given them a set of questions. I'll quickly read through those questions to remind them if they didn't jot them down. Well, I can see some of them have notes even. But they're going to talk reasonably quickly about sharing some of their experiences in this community. I gave them a whole set of questions, but I didn't ask them to answer all of them, so they have some choices in terms of how they want to address it. But they're going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to open up the floor for you folks to ask questions. And I know from having looked at the document for questions that there are some really great questions in this audience. So I really hope that you'll share some of those with our panelists today. Okay, so I'm going to say just a few words about each of our guests here. I mentioned when we were at the power plant the other day that a bunch of years ago, this community voted down a long-term investment in coal-fired power. And there was concern at the time about how having what was perceived as what was going to be more expensive power was going to affect the lowest income members of this community. And there were several people at the time who said, we're going to battle against that narrative that protecting the environment somehow is in opposition to helping people who are lower income within the community. Well, Greg Jones is in some way a manifestation of that commitment that was made. Greg Jones is the energy advocate for an organization called Power, which some of you will be working with this semester, providing Oberlin with efficiency responsibly. Greg is a certified building analyst professional, and he's skilled in many ways of analyzing homes for energy efficiency, but also in the skills of sort of working with people, understanding where they are, what they want to do, and how to get them to that place in a way that benefits them, makes them more comfortable, and reduces their energy bills and environmental impact at the same time. So it's a real pleasure to have Greg here. Heather Adelman, I'll go down the line here, is now in it is your third term on City Council, right? Is now in her third term on Oberlin City Council. She's the chair of Oberlin City Council. This city is governed by a city council, so that's kind of the equivalent of being mayor in some ways. She's also the founder of an organization called the Food Hub. This is a group that connects local farmers and restaurants and schools and other consumers to try to promote local food consumption, stimulate the local economy, drive the local foods economy. Prior to that, she worked for EPA for many years. She was the supervisor of the Tribal Solid Waste and Green Building Team at US EPA, working directly with tribal nations in Arizona, California, Nevada on recycling, composting, greenhousing, and pollution prevention. So a lot of prior experience at the sort of national scale in environmental initiatives. Moving down the line, Sharon Pearson is a lifelong resident of Oberlin, former city employee, tireless advocate for sustainability, who served, it was 3 terms you served on city council, right? So another city council member, not currently on city council, but she was employed by the city of Oberlin for 25 years, during which she received awards for community service from the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Community Pride Award for her work on coordinating the 150th anniversary of the Oberlin Wellington Rescue, in which Oberlin citizens marched to Wellington to free captured slave imprisoned there. During her 3 years as program manager for the Oberlin project, Sharon was a collaborator on the development of Community Voices, which is the component of environmental dashboard that you folks will be working on this semester. Sharon currently serves as the Lorain County's mobility manager, working towards building more sustainable and equitable and just transportation options within the larger Lorain County area. Yes, and moving on down the line, Ebony Johnson is a newly elected member of Oberlin City Council. Ebony has worked for Oberlin College for 12 years. She's the outreach and programming librarian. She was also, Ebony's the person who I know least among this group, so I'll admit that straight up. And in fact, we just met in person for the first time, amazingly. But we worked together last spring in a couple different contexts. Linda Arbogast, who's at the end here, and I'll introduce in a moment, and I, and together with the fire chief, were involved in coordinating a climate vulnerability assessment for the city of Oberlin. And Ebony was a participant in that climate vulnerability assessment evaluation. But concurrent to that, Ebony was working hard on an initiative that was seeking to explore the relationships between environmental sustainability, equity, and justice in Oberlin as part of another community effort that was going on. So we intersected in a couple different ways, and it's been a real pleasure to begin to get to know Ebony and the important work that she's doing within this community. Finally, Linda Arbogast, who surprisingly I don't seem to have a bio down here for, so I'll just freeform on this. Linda has been the sustainability coordinator for the city of Oberlin for how many years now? 3 years, a period during which the initiatives, sustainability and resilience related initiatives in Oberlin have really been quite transformed and organized in large part as a result of Linda's extraordinarily hard work on this. Prior to that, she worked for the Peace Corps as a coordinator in Guyana, as a regional coordinator for that. Prior to that, she ran Oberlin Community Services, which I pointed out on our field trip for. How many years did you do that for? 7 years. So she's a very long-standing member of this community. On the side, she also happens to run an organic blueberry farm, Pick Your Own Blueberry Farm, which many Oberlin students have taken advantage of. And if you're here in the spring after graduation, I encourage you to make a trip out to Chance Creek Blues, which is her family's organic blueberry farm. So quite a distinguished group of panelists here. I will read to you quickly the questions I posed to them, and then we'll see what they want to answer. So you know what they were asked to address, and you can think about that. Okay. So 6 questions were asked of each of these folks. Just consider, they don't need to answer all these, but how are the organizations that you work with promoting environmental sustainability in Oberlin and the larger community? Based on your experience, what do you see as the most effective practical strategies for bringing about social, economic, and environmental change? What is it in your own personal life that brought you to the work you do? What most sustains you personally in the work? What keeps you motivated, excited, and positive on a day-to-day basis? How do issues of equity and environmental justice come into play in your daily work? Knowing what you know now, what advice can you give to college students interested in making positive change within communities? Are there things that they could be doing now that they might not think of that would be valuable in the future? How do you see what you do in this place, in Oberlin, as being related to larger efforts to bring about more sustainable relationships between humans and the rest of the planet? So big questions. They've got a few minutes to answer it, and then we're going to turn over to questions that you guys have to ask. So if you guys don't mind, maybe we'll go down the line. It doesn't make much difference to me. But are you up for that, Greg?
I'm up for that. How's everybody this morning? Again, I'm Greg Jones, and I am the energy advocate for power. And my goal is to weatherize every home in Oberlin. That was the mandate that we set up, to make every home as energy efficient as possible through weatherization, insulation work, caulking, air sealing, lighting retrofits, which we have done through all the buildings and churches here so far in Oberlin. We're working on every resident that we can. We are also always starting new initiatives to increase what we do as far as water efficiency, windows, anything that can make a home as efficient as possible, save those residents energy cost money, make the houses as comfortable and as affordable as possible. In thinking of some of the questions, one of the things that I would say is most important that I would suggest to students is to get involved in the nonprofit agencies that's at your disposal here in Oberlin. There's many, many of them. And I would ask you not to just stay at one. Use your time here to work with and volunteer at multiple nonprofit agencies so that you can get a feel of how unique this community is. And I guarantee you that these experiences will help you moving forward in whatever path you choose. This is a very, very unique place. When I was doing, I started a solar company 12 years ago before I picked up this particular opportunity, but I knew it was being formed. And at the time, Sharon was a big part of putting this together, as well as John, the founding member of Power, because I felt like it was a job that I knew I could do well. And as we developed this, and it took a couple of years, I kept coming back to Oberlin to check to see how far along were you on this. And so in the meantime, I'm doing green building projects in Chagrin Falls, Cleveland, all over Detroit, just learning and just honing my craft. And when the opportunity came up, I think I was fortunate enough. Were you on that board at the time as well? Or no? But I think I kind of killed the energy because I was right there after, and I'm still here. So I love what I do. I love how I make people feel when we are able to go in and improve someone's standard of living in their home. We talk a lot about sustainability and environmental justice and the environment as a whole, but the residents here, their environment is in the house, and that is their biggest concern: health and safety, clean air, clean water, and a lower utility bill is what it's all about. And that's what I try to focus on when I'm in every home. And it's nothing like having someone say, that they were glad I was there and we should have called you early. So that's my little spiel. And I'm open for questions whenever you like.
Yeah, why don't we go?
And some of you have cards, which on the back of that card kind of gives a little brief thing of what we do.
I think we'll go down the group, but you know, you might want to, if you have additional questions beyond what you wrote down before, or you want to modify them, you can do that. But we'll go down the line and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. So.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Heather Adelman. John gave an excellent introduction. I was going to spend some time on that, but just to briefly recap, I currently serve as the president of Oberlin City Council. Previous to that, I started my career at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, working with tribal communities, primarily on waste management projects, landfills, composting, recycling, whatever it is that they identified as a priority for their own communities. Moved to Oberlin about 11 years ago and have been very fortunate to be part of this amazing, amazing community. So I think I'll answer maybe the third question first, what in my personal life has brought me to this moment. At the risk of sounding really cheesy, you know, even as a little kid, my motivating factor was always wanting to make a difference in my community. And when I made the choice to major in environmental studies, it really, and poli-sci, it was really because I wanted to do good in the world, as cheesy as that sounds. So all of my major life decisions really have brought me to where I am today. Super fortunate to be on Oberlin City Council and get to help affect the change in this particular community. Incredibly proud of the work we've done on our climate action plan, which we just did an update on. When was that, Linda? 3 years ago?
19.
So I helped write the new climate action plan. I was one of the writers of the zero waste plan that the city had in place, I don't know, about 5 years ago. And my most recent project that I'm really excited about is I was one of the architects with Linda at the end here of the new composting program for the city of Oberlin. So it's both residential and commercial food waste collection, which Oberlin College has been really fortunate to have for much longer. So actually building on your program here was enabled us to have it.
Wait, just show of hands, which group is working on the composting project there? So those guys are going to be.
Oh my gosh, I'm like obsessed with composting, so I'm super excited. I won't get into it here because everyone on this stage has heard me talk about it a million times. So other things at the city that really exciting is we have something called the Sustainable Reserve Fund, which, does anyone know what the Sustainable Reserve Fund is? Oh, cool. Okay. Well, it's a long story, but the short version is the city sells RECs, renewable energy certificates, on the open market from our, I think it's the wind and solar. And then we get money. It's kind of a weird shell game, but we actually ended up with almost $3 million a couple years ago. The council at the time was going to vote to rebate it to customers. I was one of the citizens that fought really hard and got it on the ballot to save that money to create a fund that could fund projects that would benefit the entire community. And that did pass overwhelmingly by voters. So now we have this awesome pot of money that the city can use for projects to benefit everyone. Partly funding power, to do energy efficiency for homes, you know, weatherizing City Hall, things like that. And as well as a variety of other projects like the composting program. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I'll stop there. But I could go on. Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay. My name is Sharon Pearson, and as John said, I'm a lifelong resident. And for Ebony's sake, I have to say this. My claim to fame started when I was baby Jesus in the Baptist church here. The pastor of that church was very instrumental in building town-gown relationships between Oberlin College and the community. But the work, I currently work at United Way of Greater Lorraine County, so it's not a sustainability community or organization at this point. However, my work at the Oberlin Project, which I did, Heather and I worked together, is what influenced the work that I do now in transportation. I worked for the Oberlin Project between 2011 and 2017. And in 2012, when I was brand new, I was handed this project regarding sustainability on transportation and solving that, because emissions from transportation is one of the greatest challenges we have with reducing carbon emissions. So I knew nothing about transportation at that time and had to talk with people, learn from others. go to meetings, and quickly I became the go-to person in Lorraine County regarding all things transportation. So I'm more of a generalist, not saying that I'm an expert in each one of these areas, but all of these different types of transportation need to work together. My focus right now is really mainly on social justice and equity. I am paid through the Ohio Department of Transportation to really focus on providing access for transportation, specifically for seniors, low income, persons with disabilities, and also workforce. And that's a big issue here in Lorraine County and in Oberlin. In fact, there's a recent survey that shows that over the last 14 years, our senior population has grown by 16,000. So 25% of our population are seniors. And there's a transportation survey that I do every year. People are struggling with getting access to food, access to medical, and then some of the medical for these seniors are crossing county borders, going into Cleveland, and we don't have a good system to be able to do that. This work is really important too, because it takes years and years and years and years to pay off roads that we build. I think it's ridiculous we keep on paying for roads, and I don't understand why we don't put more money into transit. Personally, this is something personal for me. I hate driving. I would love to be able to get to Cleveland or get where I need to go. If somebody else was driving, if I could ride with other people. So there's something in it for me too, especially as I get older. And so that's part of the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And also we have a challenge here in Lorraine County with being a huge county. We're the 9th largest county out of 88 in the state of Ohio. Yes. And we're the largest without a viable, good transportation system. We used to have 16 routes in Lorraine County. It is now down to 4. And they only operate every 2 hours. Oberlin is fortunate enough, thanks to City Council, for having an on-demand service. And I know that there is a discount for students to be able to ride that service. However, some of the connections that are missing are getting to the airport, getting across county lines. So those are the issues that I'm working on, and I'm very thankful not only to have started this process when I was at the Oberlin project working on it, but also to have been a city council person and having the political connections that I do, because that's where some of the challenges lie in why we don't have more transportation. Here in Lorraine County, we have a large part of our county is rural, and typically they're not getting the transportation service, so they are voting against any of the taxes that we need to expand the system. So we need to be creative. So some of my part of my job, which I do really appreciate, is looking at what existing resources do we have and making use of those instead of having to buy new to fill the gaps in unmet needs. One of the pilot projects that I'm working on that I'm very proud about right now is that a lot of the job centers are in Avon up toward the lake. And a lot of employers are struggling with finding workers. So they have all these positions. They've had job fairs, nobody's coming to them. So we figured out a way to offer free transportation for people to get to these jobs on 2nd and 3rd shifts. And they're targeting Lorraine and Elyria right now. We worked with Urban League. They had 30 people that showed up and 13 people walked away with job offers. And we're providing virtual routes in order to get them to work on 2nd and 3rd shift. So it's starting to work using technology, using existing resources, and putting all of this together. So, and some of the greatest designs that I'm very proud of when I was on City Council is the complete streets design projects, because that's where you take a look at people with disabilities, people who are walking, people who are biking, people who are on a bus, people are in a car, and designing the streets that way. Prior to me being on City Council, we had a design school about this, and we tried to invite a lot of different people from around the county, and also our city engineer at the time. And after he went through that class, he said, you know, I just finally realized all these years I've been trained to design roads for cars and cars only. It just snapped, you know, he finally got it. It's like, we really need to be more inclusive of the way that we design these roads. And when these kind of projects come about, you see greater economic activity. People want to hang out in these spaces. They're wonderful spaces. And so I think that we need to really think more about that. I'm very pleased to see more and more cities across the county considering these things because it's really an economic draw when you do this. And just one last thing, the American Public Transportation Association says that every dollar invested in public transportation generates $5 in economic activity. So that's where the environmental sustainability, environmental justice really comes into play. I mean, that's really proof. And so I'm very happy to be doing the work that I'm doing right now.
Cool. Hi, all. I'm Ebony Johnson. Everybody calls me Miss Ebony, and you can as well. As John said, I'm the outreach and programming librarian. I work in MUD most of the time, so I think I've seen some of you in through there. What he didn't say is that I'm also an OB from a very long time ago. I graduated in 1997, which
1997.
I know, right? It was like,
Well, I'm 88 equivalent, so.
So yeah, I am a brand new rookie member of City Council, so I'm learning a lot. But for the past couple of years, I had the opportunity to work on the social equity working group, which is working to create a permanent social equity plan for the city of Oberlin. And so as part of that, there were like 13 different subject groups sort of that broke out, and one of them was environmental sustainability. I worked on that one the longest, but I also worked on the food one, the transportation one, the government one, and there might have been another one. So I spread myself kind of thin, putting my hands in all those topics, and I had to step back from some of them, but I stuck with the environmental sustainability one. And so that was a lot of fun because my co-convener and I spent a lot of time having these weekly lunch sessions with members of the community to come talk about a particular topic every week. We did this for like 8 or 9 weeks, and I think probably all of y'all were involved in those at some point. But just kind of getting feedback from the community about what's working, what's not working, kind of where the gaps and hindrances are, and getting recommendations and suggestions from them about how we could make things better for everybody. So that is still kind of under development, and we're going into the next phase of the plan. The group has sort of been reconvened so we can work on the actually writing the plan, doing some more outreach with the community and research, but actually, you know, trying to get to something that is more permanent, but not waiting until the plan is complete to make progress on getting stuff done. Right. So there's the low hanging fruit that you can kind of start working on right now without waiting for a complete plan, because that's going to take a while yet. And so we're really excited about kind of entering this new phase of the plan. And so one of the questions on here that I don't think anyone's touched on yet is like, what advice might you offer to college students interested in making positive change in the community? And so I would say just get involved. One of the things that this goes way back in my memory, but I remember, I think it was my first year at Oberlin, I was sort of involved with the OPIRG. Is that still a thing? The Oberlin Public Interest Research Group?
I don't think
That's
so.
not a thing?
No.
Oh, man. That sucks. But one of the things that was kind of a hot topic at that time was environmental sustainability and stuff like that. So I have very vague memories of being part of conversations way long time ago that I had really forgotten until just now sitting in this room. But getting involved and asking questions, you are meeting people who are out there in the community doing stuff. We have lots of community organizations here in Oberlin and throughout Lorain County. I'm like working with United Way. I'm one of their kind of fundraiser volunteers, I guess you could say. And so I've had Power come out to my house and do an energy audit, which was really cool. And Linda and I have worked together. So I've worked with everyone on this board in various ways in the short time I've been here now. It's been a long time, but in the recent couple of years, just working with everyone on this board in various ways, it's been really rewarding for me. So I would say just ask questions, get to know people, and start doing stuff. I think Oberlin is in a position where we could really be a model for other small cities like us, but maybe even for bigger cities. We might be able to do things that someone else would be like, huh, I wonder if that would work here, right? And so we have a lot of brain capital in this town for sure. And so I think there's a lot of ways that we can set an example for other cities like ours and even bigger ones. So just get in there, because you never know where a thing will take you, right? You start volunteering maybe with community services or some other organization, and you might just end up in places you never dreamed you would go. But you got to take a step and get started. So I think I will leave it there and pass it to Linda.
Great. So excited to be here, and I am especially just happy to be in this group. You may not know it, but this is just a star-studded cast right here. People like you see here, including Mr. Peterson, Professor Peterson, are not just typical. You know, I'd say every one of us gets up every day and tries to think really hard about what it is we want to accomplish and how we're going to do it. There's no easy answers. We all just think hard about this. And I think, you know, as evidenced by each of the short presentations of like, this is hard work, but you're either willing to get in there and try, as Ebony suggests, or, you know, it just sort of overwhelms you. So, all right, I'll get off my little soapbox, but so I want to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got to where I am. So I'm originally from northern Minnesota, way up by Duluth, a small little farm. You know, the last kid of 6 in a farm family. I was really just grew up on my own, pretty much. And, you know, I had a horse. That was sort of my only thing that had any social context to that. And we went to a Lutheran church up on the hill, just a very typical sort of little white church on a hill. That was my whole sort of social scene. I was the first kid in my family to go to town to school. All the others, my other siblings, went to this one-room schoolhouse where they, you know, walked a couple of miles. So yeah, I'm only 56, but you know, that was life in northern Minnesota. My parents went through 8th grade in school. So very first gen in that college experience. When I mentioned to my parents I wanted to go to college, they were like, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, how did you do that? And I was just like, oh, forget it. I'll figure it out. You know? But anyway, I did go to college. I went to a big state school in Minnesota, and you know, it was hard. It was just so out of my comfort zone. I couldn't even tell you. But I realized quickly that it was like a big party scene and I just needed to get out. I just was like, all right, got here. So I studied abroad my second year because I really was like, okay, I could just stay here and drink, or I could go do something new. And that really was the opening for me of like realizing, one, I had sort of control of what I was going to do. And two, the world is a big place. There's a lot to do, a lot to learn. I won't tell you all the things I did, but I went from college to Peace Corps, was a Peace Corps volunteer in Sri Lanka. I then worked abroad in Asia, Southeast Asia, for about 7 years, lots of different places. Spent a lot of time in war zones. Mostly I was working in health and education projects, but really it just opened my eyes to sort of how the world was and my role in it. And at every step, I realized how much power an individual had. Like, you just need to decide you're willing to do it. And, you know, I went to Sri Lanka. I was an ag volunteer. I was on a chicken project, but there was like war going on all around. There was no way to get chicken feed. There were all sorts of problems. But what I did do was work with villagers and start a school for kids with disabilities, because that was the need. There were kids there. They weren't able to go to school for lots of reasons. And so it was sort of like, well, here's the need. I'm someone who can do stuff. That's what I did. So that's sort of how I've rolled. Landed in Oberlin after getting a graduate degree in international administration, getting married, having 3 kids. We came here. because Oberlin was this community. I never really thought I'd come back to the Midwest because just having left it, I was like, oh. But people, including my husband, were like, no, you should check out Oberlin. You might just find. And he was right. It's sort of the happy medium place for me of sort of culturally, yeah, I get the Midwest. And also Oberlin has this vibe of like can-do spirit. And I won't say that it's easy because it isn't. Even in Oberlin, you know, so we're surrounded by very conservative people. And these people matter, you know, we can't just say, oh, this, you know, we're right, you're wrong. It's just not how it is. And working at the city now, most of the people who work at the city are not from Oberlin. They're from surrounding communities. So Oberlin City Council may pass some pretty progressive things, but we still have to implement them. So it's really learning how to work with people and learning how to just compromise and move the, you know, our progressive agenda along as it makes sense. So my job now as the sustainability coordinator is to implement the climate action plan. And I think you've all had a chance to look at that. So it's huge, right? I mean, it's everything. So I'm handed this very giant transportation and green buildings and land use and local foods and renewable energy. And it's like, I'm an office of one. So I say that because I do need you all. And I work with students in so many ways. And I love every opportunity I have to work with you all. So have you all heard of the EV car share program? Have any of you driven those cars?
Which group is focused on the EV car share program? Okay, so we've
Oh,
got interviewing on that.
So that started just as an idea. And the idea came from an Oberlin College student who was actually an Oberlin Conservatory student who had this idea, and it sort of metamorphosized itself in many ways, and he didn't really get anywhere with it. And he came into my office and we talked it through, and we had lots of meetings, and it took us 2 years, and we have this program. And it was really just one student saying, you know what, there really needs to be better options here, and we really should have electric options. And what was really exciting for me about that program is that it brought an electric car to a community that was very skeptical, I'll tell you, but also made it accessible. So it's relatively inexpensive. For $8, you can drive an electric car. And if you're someone who's never driven an electric car and have no comfort level with it, here's a way to do that. So I was super excited about it. It was not an easy sell to council, but we've had this now for a solid year, and it has really, the usage has gone much faster and built momentum much faster than any of us expected. So super exciting. But I just give that as an example as you guys, you know, it may seem overwhelming when you see like the IPCC report that came out last week of just like the dire consequences of our world. And I certainly can get overwhelmed. But if we all find our passion and we find our thing that we can do, you have the power. I mean, look at Greta Thunberg, right? She's just this nerdy kid who's like, okay, I don't really have any friends. I'm sort of a social outcast, but here's something I can do every Friday. I can sit outside my school with this sign and tell the world I don't accept this, you know, our non-responsiveness to climate. And she did that, and look at her now, all that she's doing. I mean, it really, all of you have the power. So I'll just close with, I work with work study students, I work with honor students, capstone projects, honors students. Think about what you really want to do, where you see yourself connecting in that climate action plan. Come talk to me.
Well, thank you guys so much. As promised, we're going to turn things over to questions and have sort of a free-form discussion here. Like I say, I saw some great questions that folks posted. And anyone want to go first? Yeah, go ahead, Ezra.
So this is how do you plan to take what you all are doing here and go into the world? Essentially, what is the end goal? And will this initiative only be overall, or do you hope to expand it to other regions within the United States and essentially?
Well, I can start. I am one of 40 mobility managers across the state of Ohio, and most mobility managers are in small rural communities because of the challenge of of access. And so I'm very pleased and grateful that I have a network of people where we are talking amongst each other and sharing the work. For instance, that pilot project that I talked to you about regarding getting low-income people over to these paid jobs. I have a county next door to us who are looking. We have businesses that are wanting to get on board. Actually, this idea came from a video I saw of what they were doing in Denmark, where they do this wonderfully, where they use technology, they use vehicles, and they're connecting, and they're getting out into the rural communities, helping seniors and others get where they need to go. So I was inspired by that and had a vision. It was because of the pandemic that all of this has expedited this work. I don't think we would be here right now with the work that we're doing if it hadn't been for the pandemic and the shortages of workers for these places. So, you know, I'm working with the network and hoping that others can benefit from it too.
I'm happy to jump in. So I am part of, I guess, a global network through ICLEI, and ICLEI is a German acronym, but it's a group that works with making cities around the world more sustainable. So we work together in various projects and cohorts. And so in that way, I feel like, you know, we learn from each other. Hey, this city and maybe in Germany is doing this really cool thing that we can learn from. And Oberlin, you know, we share what we're doing. And then more locally, I'm super excited about this, is that NOACA, the
Northeast Ohio Area Coordinating Agency.
that has just asked me to be the local representative for a panel, because NOACA wants to develop a Northeast Ohio climate action plan for the whole region. And so there'll be a county representative, a larger regional representative, and then I'll be the small city representative. So I'm really excited that Oberlin has a chance to share our experience with the region.
I'll just say very briefly that I think much like the college, the city has an outsized influence in the world compared to our size. So we are a very small town, much like Oberlin College is a fairly small university, but I know that Oberlin College's influence, especially in the world of sustainability, in the world of colleges and universities, is huge. And I think the city of Oberlin also has that influence, maybe not quite as distinct as Oberlin College, but you know, there's a lot of things that we do, particularly in Ohio, that are really trend setting. I think we were the first community to have a climate action plan. I believe we're the first community to have a zero waste plan, where I don't know of any other community that has a sustainable reserve fund the way we do. And so other communities, perhaps not as much in Ohio because of Ohio politics, do look to Oberlin quite often for what we're doing. And we get a lot of requests for, you know, how did you do that? So.
The other unique thing I like to say is other communities do not have an energy advocate like myself. There's 88. Well, I like to say that our basis was from the Columbia Gas Program. I know you guys aren't familiar with that, but that's the gas supplier for this community, but also the other 88 counties in Ohio. So the program, or part of the program that Power is responsible for, is through the Columbia Gas Program, because they offer benefits and discounts for their clients. So in actuality, what I have been doing is really kind of working for the gas company to assist lowering the gas rates for their customers. Now that program exists in all 88 counties where Columbia Gas exists. But again, you don't have me there pushing these programs to the people who don't know about it. And that was the unique thing about here in Oberlin. I've gone door to door in this community more than once to bring, and you students have helped me in previous classes.
Which group is working on power? Show of hands here. Okay, so this
Which we'll see is, particularly when the weather breaks and we can get out, is what we do to promote the services that Power offers. And again, I say that's another unique aspect of What Overland does, because their funding through the Sustainable Reserve Fund is only for Overland residents. But I live in Elyria. And so I have used what I know to help my Elyria neighbors and in my neighborhood to say, hey, call the city program and see what they have. Now, it's totally different in Elyria and Lorraine to what we have here in Overland, but it's also much cheaper and much easier for them to get on board. But they have no idea that the program exists for them. So particularly in my own neighborhood, I tell my neighbors about it. And they were happy that I did because they get their whole houses done for $300. It only costs $300 to get insulated. All the weatherization needs in Elyria and Lorraine are different. So other communities can look at what we're doing here. If they're fortunate enough to have a pot of money sitting somewhere and they really are interested in being more efficient for their residents, then they can set up something like this. But I always think that we in Overland as a whole are the pilot program for many other programs throughout the state.
Maybe I just want to piggyback and make one more comment. You as students, people who are moving into adulthood and professions here, have the opportunity, if you want to change the world, to intervene at many different sort of levels in the system. And obviously today we're focused very much on the local level. The reality is, and I think you guys understand this, it's been difficult to get action at the federal level for quite some time now. So really most of the really exciting work that's going on within sustainability is at the local, regional, and state levels right now. So there's just this enormous wealth of experimentation that you're seeing here now in many different communities, and people learning from each other. And you're going to want to think about if what you want to do is make change. What are your skills? How could you fit into these various different levels? And where's your own leverage point in that system? I saw someone with a hand up just a second ago.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to pose another question, Sharon. I heard you earlier mention the pandemic, and that has impacted transportation systems across the globe. What are some of the ways Lorraine County has been impacted, and what kind of changes have been implemented to sort of mitigate the damages the pandemic has kind of caused on the transportation system?
That's a tough question, because I think it has more people have stayed home, or instead of going to doctor's offices, they've been doing telehealth appointments, which has been a challenge with our county growing older, with 25% of our population being over 60, and they may not fully understand how to use a computer. So in a way, I think it has hurt it, because I think people have been afraid. But I think where the positive comes in is the expediting technology, using that to still get services, whether it be shopping online, to be able to get your groceries delivered to you, contactless. But as far as transportation, I think the only thing where I can see that has really helped was there are a lot of businesses out there hurting for workers. And with this pilot project we have going on, prior to the pandemic, these are businesses that did not look at Lorraine or Elyria. That's not where they wanted their employees from. They really ruled out a lot of people, and now they are so desperate that they're going, I don't care. We need to get these jobs filled. So from that standpoint, I think it's been positive. And so now they're open to looking at all these different solutions and willing to work with us, because I've been talking about workforce transportation since 2012, but nobody wanted to listen to me because everybody, oh, I have enough workers, I don't need it. Now all of a sudden they're starting to pay attention, and it's starting to work. So I think in a way more damage has probably been done because people aren't traveling as much. But I think that there are opportunities like we have with this pilot project to really make a difference and to fill in the gaps as needed. I know that may not have answered it the way that you wanted to, but I just see a shift regarding technology in particular.
Thank you very much.
Question in the back.
For everyone in general, in your opinion, what is a reliable and educational way to reach out to students, or if that's too broad, to specific people about environmental issues? In other words, based on your experience, what methods have worked best in educating people about environmental issues?
Well, for me, it's the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. It's easier to talk about the environmental issues surrounding you once I've taken care of the environmental issues in your home. And so that leads to me being able to open a broader discussion on why it's important that we did this particular thing at your house, and hope that you will take that to your neighbors, friends, and other people to promote what we're doing, so that we can do that in each house, and then that message of the larger need can come into play.
I was gonna say, I think it's personal contact, and talking with people that you do know, can be an easier pathway to those discussions than, talking to random strangers about it. But, when you have people who have done energy audits in their home, or they've had improvements made, and then, you can talk to your friend like, oh, I had this done in my house. This is why it was really important. Maybe you should think about doing that as well. And so that kind of networking that we all have, we have people in our network, our friends, families, coworkers, whatever. And then we can talk about it like that. But also, I think it's just about making small changes. And like we were talking in our environmental sustainability group last year, like we're talking about really big issues that sound overwhelming and scary, and how in the world can we make it better? But you don't have to start big, right? It can start really small, like with maybe composting. And so I started composting through the city's program this year, and I'm noticing how much less trash is going out every year. I have probably more recycling and compost than actual trash right now. But just noticing small shifts like that, it doesn't take a whole lot to throw your food waste in a little bin and then take it to the big composting thing for pickup, right? So I just make that a part of my routine when I'm cooking and doing all the things that I do. And it's a really small change that I'm noticing just in my household of one, right, is making a difference. And so I think that's really important.
So I'm going to go back to my community voices days. Does Jenny Hirsch come and speak?
No, not anymore. Not in this class anyway.
Oh, okay. So I learned a lot from her, which helped develop the community voices section. One of the things I think that is important to be careful of is making sure that you're speaking the same language with people and defining what you're talking about, because you can get into the environmental world and start throwing out sustainability, environment, and some people are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So that's why with the community voices, we started defining, we would say environments or sustainability, define what that means, and then allow people to say, relate pieces of that and be able to speak what that means to them. And then that's how you can get on the same, I think, conversation with them, and it's a little bit easier. The other part is really also identifying those pain points that people have, because I remember talking to some of the church leaders before, and we were using environment sustainability, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And then they were like, oh, my oranges prices are going up because it's cold in Florida. Is that what you're meaning? And so you have to sometimes relate to some of those pain points. And then I think people are going to be more willing to listen to you, because they want to understand, is there a way to solve this problem? And how what is it and what can I do? So that's just what I learned when we were doing the community voice.
One thing I'll share about that, but I have lots of questions, is kids. So I had the good fortune to do some presentations to 7th graders this year, and talking about the sort of climate action plan, what's all in it. But the really exciting part of that was like, okay, so you just heard that. What does that mean to you? And hearing from them, and then then building on that. And then we talked about, well, in your house, what can you do? And we talked about all the possibilities of composting and recycling. And I talked about like, well, when you want to go to your friend's house, what do you do? How do you get there? Oh, I asked my dad for a ride. I was like, well, can you bike there? Could you walk there? And what difference would that make? And why would that matter? And so really making it real for them, and then working with kids. The sense is that gets home, that goes home to their families. And I feel like it does. Generally, kids bring those messages home.
You know, I want to piggyback. I'm sorry. A week from today, we're going to have a colleague come in who actually works very closely with Greg, Cindy France. She's in social psychology. She's a social psychologist over in the psychology department. But one of the real insights I've learned over the years from kind of learning more about social psychology, not my field, is when you think about actions and thought, we tend to have this model in our head that thought comes first and then action. And very often what I've learned is it works the other way. So this gets to some of what Greg is saying is when you insulate someone's home, they're more comfortable, they're spending less on energy. And you've talked with them a little bit about the connections between what they're doing in their house and climate change. That the fact that they are engaging in actions that are benefiting the climate, they're gonna make what they're doing in their home consistent with their worldview. And so it may be starting in their home, but that's like the beginning of them sort of changing their thinking about their relationship with the world and what they're doing. Once their actions are consistent with this larger environmental framework of understanding, their thinking is gonna broaden on that. So again, it's important to understand that sometimes the first important thing to do is to help people to getting to do the right thing, which may be for reasons that are totally unrelated to the environment. But once they're doing that, once they're insulated, once they're composting, once they're driving an electric vehicle, the rest fits into this framework that then makes sense to them. So it's just an important insight to keep in mind. It's like when you're engaging with someone, you imagine you need to convince them about some larger global framework first. That's oftentimes not the way it works, and understanding that is really, really important. So somebody, yeah.
This is kind of for anyone, but people in the city council might be best equipped for it. According to the climate action plan, it looks like you have dozens of different smaller plans that are ongoing. So how do you commit to all of these plans and delegate the work in such a small community?
Like Linda might be.
Wow, that's a good question. So yeah, when I was saying like I was handed this plan and said, here, this is your job. That's what I've been having to figure out. So it's finding out what's already happening in the community and where there's momentum and who's excited about what. Heather's excited about compost. Let's go. Let's figure out this composting. Sharon's got transportation. Let's work with Sharon and her group to get, an expanded LCT. So really finding where you have momentum, what people are excited about. Sometimes it's just community members who call you up and say, hey, school building really needs solar. What can we do about that? A lot of it is just finding momentum. But also prioritizing. I've done, let's see, over the years, we've had 3 greenhouse gas inventories done. So assessing where the emissions are coming from the community and looking at that in a hard way. The most recent inventory was done in 2018. And it's really, gas. Gas is the driver of the emissions and mostly in buildings, heating buildings primarily. And the commercial sector, and then the residential sector, and then transportation is third in there. So it's all important, but you also have to, keep your eye on the prize of reducing those emissions and our goals over the years.
Yeah, so this is really for anybody. I was just curious about how the city and the college's recycling programs work. So I know I've read some different things about whether or not they college recycles. How that works with the city program.
I can take a crack at that. So the pandemic the recycling program took a big hit during the pandemic. And I won't belabor all the details, but prior to the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, we did have, as a community and at the college, recycling for most of the things that you would expect: paper, cardboard, metals, plastics, etc. During the pandemic, the city had to reassess a little bit because of staffing issues. But then there was also this other global phenomenon happening where countries that historically took recyclables from places like the United States stopped taking them because they were so contaminated. And we were having major issues in the city of Oberlin with contamination issues. So we had 4 different, maybe it was 5 different days, routes. There was the Monday route, Tuesday route, et cetera. Some of those routes were up to 50% of the material collected in the recycling was not recyclable. And so when it would go to the MRF, the material recovery facility out at the landfill just outside of town, they were not only charging us, almost 3 times the amount for the equivalent amount of trash to recycle. If it was above a certain percent contamination rate, they added an additional, I believe, $75. So we were paying, I wouldn't quote me on these numbers, but somewhere in the $30 range for trash per ton. For recycling, we were paying $150 a ton. And it wasn't being recycled, right? The glass was going to build roads in the landfill, which then were in the landfill. And it was so contaminated that often they would just take it all to the landfill. So we were paying exponentially more and it was not being recycled. So during the pandemic, when staffing was also an issue, we were like, okay, we're going to stop the program. We're going to reassess. And then when we restarted up, it's now an opt-in program for residential customers. Households say, yes, I want to do it. They have to sign a little pledge that research has shown is actually really effective in changing behavior. And we stopped collecting glass because I think we can all agree putting it in the landfill as a road is not recycling, particularly at the cost. So unfortunately, the college got kind of caught up in that. And I think conversations with Public Works are ongoing right now to get it restarted at the college. I know there's some staff changes at the college. The people that were working with the city are gone. So hopefully soon there'll be recycling at the college again.
Is there a question over here? Yes, you have a question?
Yes, this is for the city council. So as the leaders of Oberlin, how important is it to strike a balance between economic development and environmental protection?
Good question. I'm talking a lot. You wanna?
Keep talking.
Well, I want to make sure.
You can keep talking. And I'm just wondering that- So I'm a rookie. This is really like my 2nd month on city council, so I'm still learning a whole lot. So I will let Madam President take that.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. No, it's a great question. It's an ongoing conversation for a lot of decisions that city council makes. I think the most recent one where that was hotly debated was the rezoning of a piece of property. So if you go down Main Street, I don't know how many of you guys go down to like the Walmart area, but that's 58 Main Street. On the east side of the street, there's a large parcel of land that a developer would like to create lots of things, but retail space, a grocery space, I think fast food, things like that. The city, it did come before the city council to be rezoned because it was zoned, I believe, office, and it needed to be rezoned commercial. So, there was a lot of debate. Do we want to encourage development sort of outside the core downtown? Is that important to have a more low cost grocery store for residents, as a balance between some of the other food options in Oberlin? Is it important to consider our tax base and having more revenue come in, particularly in the time of pandemics? And we've realized, there are some liabilities in the city of Oberlin, in terms of our revenue stream. So in the end, it was approved for rezoning, but there were conversations about, we're going to require sidewalks to increase mobility, so people could walk down there and get to those places. And we did talk to the developer about requiring or encouraging higher standards of green building and insulation and things like that. So I think there is a way to do it, but it's never an easy conversation.
I think you mentioned a little bit about what the pandemic affected the city of Oberlin, and how is there like also positive impacts about the pandemic that hits the community living on less, like in terms of transportation, energy use, and consumption, as well as how is this city and college poised to benefit from the climate change and the the economic opportunities that we have on the community.
Well, I would say as far as transportation goes, living in a town like Oberlin where it's very walkable is great. However, when referring back to the rezoning, while I'm happy to see new development coming in, one of my concerns is these more affordable places are moving farther away from people who need these services. And if you don't have a car, it makes it more of a struggle for them to get there. But one of the things that I've always loved about being in Oberlin was the fact that when I was working at the Oberlin project, I was able to live 200 feet away. I had a rental car when they used to have the rental car that I could use if I needed to go someplace, or it was great for me I knew so many people I could get a ride because this was such a friendly community to be able to get where I needed to go outside of the city of Oberlin. So, those are the things that I can say, but maybe Heather, you can answer something, or Ebony.
I would say too, like with the rezoning and the push for sidewalks and making it easy, that's going to make a world of difference. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've driven down 58 in that direction to go to Walmart or whatever. And there are people walking down, there's no sidewalks after maybe
After
Hamilton Street, right? And so walking down Walmart, the 58 toward Walmart at night in the dark, wearing dark clothing, it's really hard to see. So even with headlights, and it's risky. I wouldn't do it, but it also scares me when I see people, walking either way from that direction at night. So I'm really excited about the sidewalk action, and I've heard from other people around the community that they're excited about the grocery store coming, and it seems like it would be an affordable option for them. Unfortunately, it's not quite, in the core area of town. But at least it's another option for people to take advantage of.
I wanted to add on that question. So John and I are part of the Climate Adaptation Task Force. So this was the group that convened after the vulnerability assessment. So we have a group of, I think, 30 some community members, and we convene once a month to look at sort of the vulnerabilities on all of the systems that vulnerability assessment assessed. So where are we vulnerable, but then what are our assets? And we're looking at sort of a couple months ago, we had a presentation from various food groups. The Food Hub being one of them, Overland Community Services being another, City Fresh that delivers local produce. So it's kind of asset mapping of these are the things that we have in regards to food. Here's where we're still lacking, and here's what climate change is bringing our way in the food area. So we're starting to look at sort of where we're strong, but where we aren't yet strong, and what we need to do to adapt as we go along.
Yes.
How do you pace yourself?
More.
Really great.
Passionate about something. You have to do what it takes in order to get some of the stuff done, because you can't slow down sometimes. And it's just so important for people who don't have a voice, who don't know what to do, who don't have the political connections. I guess I do it for that reason. I pace myself when I can. I do have to take some downtime, but it's sometimes it's just too important to pace myself if it needs to get done.
I will say it's important. I know we don't want to do it, but exercise. Like, you just got to find keeping yourself healthy, because you just can't keep going if you don't find how, eating well, getting enough sleep, exercise. I prioritize, like, I will do it. I'll take time out of my day and I'll just make myself, take care of myself so that I can continue. You have to find that, but also find something you love. Like John mentioned, we have a blueberry farm, and sometimes it's just work. Like, you just get out there and work, and you're physical and you're doing something outside, you're in the soil. That can be really sustaining for me.
And sometimes that, like, working your body allows your mind to kind of process things that are just hanging out in there that need thought. But sometimes you have to reprioritize. And I'm a new homeowner, right? And so I've got a long list of things that I want to do or need to do in my house. And so, like, every week things get shifted around. Like, oh, this comes to the top of the list now. When I've got a squirrel infestation in my garage, right? And so I was like, yeah, that can wait. I want to do something else first. Well, nope, this is the year of the garage. So that's come up to the top. But I think it's important to be able to reprioritize, and then sometimes things might deprioritize themselves, right? But reevaluating and reprioritizing, and also just taking time to let your brain process things while your body is doing something else is important. If you don't take care of you, then you're not available to take care of all of the many things that are demanding our attention.
Yeah, I think for me, you have to pick your spots, because we all get projects that just, we're obsessed with. And I think what I do is, once I've completed one of those types of projects, I can do a kind of woo-saw for myself. And I'm a big movie buff, so I'll go watch a movie. And then when I go watch a movie, I'm into the movie, everything else is gone. But it refreshes me, so you can step out and say, okay, bam, there's the answer to this problem. Or now I see it. But you have to sometimes step away and get yourself refreshed, I'd say, to go back to address, to dive back into that pool to find the answers you need to. And I'm constantly, every house is different, every situation is different. That's part of what motivates me, but it's also what excites me, to be able to accomplish goals each time I step into a house. So that's what I think.
I saw this meme that I just wanted to throw out there because it was cute. I sent it to my son. So it's the old, have you tried turning it on and off again? So it's like going to sleep is the same, bodily function. Just turn it off and turn it on again, start over.
And then drink coffee.
And then drink coffee. Yep.
That's where you've had your hand up for a long time. You go again.
This is for the city council people. I was wondering how you go about being sustainable while also addressing the lack of resource and opportunity for people with low economic status. Moreover, how you go about distributing the funds to ensure that every target area you want to fulfill is to the best capacity.
That's a fantastic question. And I think probably Ebony and Linda are better poised to answer that. But, Ebony mentioned the social equity plan that the city has, 2 years ago started?
Yeah.
So it's been a very, very robust process to really look pretty critically at the city and how it is in the world and how we can do better across multiple sectors, including police, environment. I mean, I won't get into all health.
There's like 13 of these kind of working groups, but as part of the definition that we started the group by making a definition of what social equity means. And basically it's making it easier for everyone in the community, regardless of any identifying factors like age, race, gender, blah, 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 to be able to fully participate in the processes, decision-making, and all of that stuff that happens in the city. And so I think one important part of that is just weaving social equity into the fabric of how the city works at all levels. So like no one has to out themselves. If like they need help, go to a city office. You don't have to say, oh, well, I have blah, blah, blah disability, for an example, but just kind of eliminating barriers as much as possible so that everyone can fully participate. I think is the main goal of what the working group has been working on, and ultimately what we want to be reflected in the full social equity plan.
And
I just want to add to, you mentioned low income communities. Yeah, I just want to point out that the Sustainable Reserve Fund, and part of what Heather was talking about earlier, in creating that fund, those monies that now help the entire community, at first was going to be designated to the highest users of utilities. And it would have went back to those groups, and the rest of the community would have gotten literally nothing. Heather and them fought to have this be more equitable by allowing this fund to be created, and then therefore using this fund to address the needs of anyone in Oberlin. The only stipulation is you have to be an Oberlin resident, and you have to be part of the OMLPS, which is Oberlin's utility, electric utility. With that in mind, any resident, regardless of income, has the opportunity to contact Power, get an energy assessment on the home, and then we address those needs to the home with funds that were supplied by the Sustainable Reserve Fund. So it makes no difference who you are in this community. You can get some of that money used to address the needs in your home. That's just one example.
And yeah, just to add on what Greg is
And,
saying.
and the other add-on is Brenda's in charge. You know, she covers me.
But I mean, in a practical sense, Greg just really nailed it, is that every project that somebody would bring to us and ask for funding would have to be looked at through, as I will quote Sharon Pearson, through the lens of social equity. Like, how is this project going to be accessible to everyone in this community? And that's what we've done with everything we've funded.
Well, we have unfortunately run down on time here, and I just want to say at the end what I said earlier. I am so grateful for each of the individuals here for the work they're doing in this community. You have some of Oberlin's best and finest in front of you right now, and it's really been an honor to have them come here and share their incredible wisdom with you. So thank you to our panel.
Thanks for having us.
You guys are
Seven on Saturday. My baby.
Hey there, how are you? Good to see you, Chris. Sorry I messed up and sent you that reminder. That was just a mistake.
No worries. Yeah, I had another question. I saw there was like a some sort of forum due today, an energy forum.
An energy forum.
Or interview on the interview forum on the syllabus.
Due today.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be anything due today. Find the link and send it to me, because maybe I messed up somehow. Where was this listed? Do you remember?
It's on the syllabus on Black. For today's class. It was like CV.
I think that's for next week. But let me send me, if you can find that, send it to me so I can straighten that out. Because